Why, hello. This is the Sober Atheist Podcast, and we are at episode 29. And I'm here on New Year's Day with my co-host and dear friend, Michael Tingley. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm good.
Good. And it's sort of a auspicious day because it's the first day of a new year, and we're both here and we're both doing our thing, which is another good thing.
Happy New
Year to you and everyone
Here we go again.
out there around the world. We have some nice representation in terms of listenership from some countries overseas, so we should always mention our friends out there, other than us Americans, which is being an international group of folks. But we are here at episode 29, and the order of business today on the first day of the year, and the title of the podcast is How to Construct a Recovery for Yourself Without Divine Intervention, which I believe most of our listeners are okay with the title. But let's see where we go with the content here, because we've been discussing this topic in one way or another in other episodes, but we thought that this was a good way to begin the new year and possibly clarify what we truly mean regarding this in our own recoveries. And, that we've been doing this a long time. Michael just had his 20th anniversary recently. And if I make it 2 more days which I think is a probability, on the 3rd of January, 3rd of this month, I'll have 39 years. So I've been around a while.
Yeah, bravo.
Next year, if I can make it to the 40th, that'll be an event. I'll have to get the family together for that one. But we're both here and we're both doing our thing, but we have had to carefully and sometimes painfully build our recovery for ourselves over these many years. And we've each got our own perspectives on this, and we'll be talking about that. I mean, Michael, do you think that's a good way to frame this when we start this thing out?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just explaining how and why we've done this, and what works and what doesn't, and what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past.
Right. And we should never forget that as atheists, as determined hardcore atheists, I hate to use the word hardcore because not all our listeners are hardcore. And I may be a little bit more hardcore than you are, Michael.
Well, I'm not sure what that means, but
okay, then we can go into. We'll do another episode on what is hardcore.
Well, it's softcore.
I got a couple hard ones.
So am I softcore? If you're hardcore?
No, you're not softcore. You're just we have our different personalities and our different ways of framing this. All right, but
I'm probably more X-rated than you are.
Yeah, I had a lot of X-ray in my life, both professionally and recently in other places, which we're not going to talk about that stuff today. We already did that last time. But we do, I think, both agree that we're pretty much on our own in fundamental ways when we're newly sober, and we find ourselves attending these meetings designed for and explicitly oriented toward obviously religious and or spiritual belief systems. I was very lucky. I was not going to meetings in Alabama or Mississippi or Louisiana or Texas. I was going to my first meetings in downtown D.C., where there tends to be a more liberal crowd. But even when I scratched those, lobbyists and lawyers and managers and government people and all the other type of folks that were attending those meetings I first went to, when I scratched most of them, it came down to, so, if it wasn't religious, it was definitely spiritual, that you had to find some sort of spiritual life, right? Which I categorically and totally rejected. I just couldn't.
Well, I never really understood what that means, even. I mean,
well, it's vague. It's the back door. It's what Wilson called the back. It was basically, they actually admitted it. I think in a lot of places in their original place, Wilson called it the sort of the beginning point or the back door to faith, okay, of some sort. Which, again, we got to stop ourselves here. If spirituality and faith and, going to places that are religiously oriented do it for you, then please stay sober, go in peace, and don't pay what I'm talking about any attention.
Right? Whatever gets you through the night, man. I mean, if you're gonna do it,
right. That's your way of putting it.
If it works, it works.
If it works, it works, and I'm not gonna argue with that. But what we're talking about here is what happened to us that may have some applicability to others, because we get feedback from this podcast, and we often hear about the feelings of alienation and aloneness, even in relation to so-called secular groups, which is kind of a mind blower, where it can seem that there is an implied push for redemption, and they've come up with these other things that sort of lead you in that direction, with things like this stuff called, whatever it is, emotional sobriety, right? Or things related to an accommodation with a spiritual life, okay? That you're supposed to sort of accommodate to or accept, that people have that way of thinking, which is okay if it's just applied to other people, but it's definitely, and we get feedback from people saying they feel that they're getting pushed in that direction, even in the subtle and sort of gentler kind of way. So, I'm not a big fan of AI, but it's really interesting sometimes, right? And I sent you a copy of this that popped up. I haven't gone all the way with the Chat GBT or the other system. My wife's got some stuff on her computer that just terrifies me. This chats talks to you, whatever it does. But I got the obviously the Google thing, and the Google AI is always popping up on the Google AI. And it got my attention about this emotional sobriety thing, because AI says, and I don't know if it's absolutely true, but this is what AI said, that this term emotional sobriety was first coined by Alcoholics Anonymous AA co-founder Bill Wilson. Wow. Okay. It's not new pop psychology. It's actually one of the foundational parts of that system, that old decrepit system that got you, if you weren't spiritual, it got you in the mood to be spiritual by pushing you toward various things. And this emotional sobriety thing was really kind of brilliant, okay? Because it sort of framed it in a way where an AI says here, oh, I love this, that it's beyond abstinence. While physical sobriety is the act of not using substances, emotional sobriety is the internal work of achieving emotional balance and maturity. okay? Which sounds pretty cool, right? It sounds that, you know, that you get all this wonderful stuff, but you only get the wonderful stuff if you start working on it their way. That's the way you get it, right? And it's
And
a
also, how do they define those two terms? What is emotional balance, and what is maturity? I mean, those are ambiguous terms. I mean,
right,
it could mean a
right.
lot of different things to a lot of different people.
What's right?
you know,
What's emotional balance and maturity and living a balanced and happy life is maybe different from, you know, different from what you or anybody else thinks it is. Okay. But that's what you need to get where you need to go, which to me means that there is a gateway to what you do to define yourself and the definitions that make sense in your life. And that gateway has always been and will always be abstinence. That's in a little cosmology that you and I have. The only absolute is abstinence. Without abstinence, I'm just speaking for myself, and I'm sure you agree. Without abstinence, I don't have a life at all. I've got nothing.
well, it's at least very different.
Well, it's the kind. In my case, at my age, it would be very, very short indeed. But
I mean, when I think back to my using years, it was very easy for me to define my emotional balance was out of balance, and my maturity was immature. I mean, that's I think those are two things that are just a part of being addicted to drugs and alcohol. There's definitely not a sense of balance, and there's definitely not a sense of maturity. So if I'm sober, if I'm clean and sober, and I'm not using those things, I mean, I would think that in a way, I'm automatically a little more emotionally balanced and a little more mature, right, just by the fact that I've been abstinent.
Right. And all of these positive aspects of living a more balanced and rational life are wonderful, okay, for the individual. But the way it's framed, when you listen to the way people pushing this emotional sobriety thing is that sobriety is linked to a system that gets you to a place where, for example, one of the things they talk about in those conventional rooms is living life on life's terms, all right? Which, with our recent health challenges we've talked about openly, that's a pretty good thing to be able to do. I mean, we take whatever stress and upset we have in our life today and we learn to deal with it, all right? But when you look at the way it was framed and always has been framed in this recovery world, the only way you get to live life on life's terms is to have some sort of spiritual life. When you scratch them at the end, that's what it's about. That's what you get. And what do we do? The people that reject that, what do we do if we're told that that's the way we have to be and that's the path we need to follow to achieve what is good and positive in life? And I say horseshit to that, all right? I got a lot of wonderful things in my life, okay, that had nothing to do with any of that, but had everything to do with abstinence. I was having lunch during this period, I don't want to even say what Trump calls it, this period of whatever it is, holiday period, I was having lunch with my incredible 32-year-old daughter, my older daughter, the other day. She is out in Northern Virginia now. Um, and she was talking to me about some of the great stuff she's doing in the school she's in and a lot of other things that are going to lead to uh, uh, good and better things for her. And I got to the point in the conversation where we were talking about a little bit about uh, my absence overseas while they were young and the failed marriage and all that other stuff. And like always, she looks at me and she says, you know, that's all in the past and it's okay. And gave me every indication that she was happy and grateful for having the advantage and stability that she had that I was able to create in part, well, in great part, because I had a fairly, I had a good grounding in my own sobriety before she was born, right? I had about 7 years of good and healthy um, sobriety, which had nothing whatsoever to do with or was related to anything about having a spiritual life or a religious conviction. Nothing. Where'd that all come from, right? Came from finding a path that worked, that fortunately in my old age, I'm getting validated by somebody who was there, okay? Who could have come up with all kinds of things about, you know, absent daddy being away a lot, flying all over the world when she was young, and, you know, broken marriage and all this other stuff. But I got none of that. All right. How do we get there from here as atheists when we have these people telling us that we have to believe things that we know are untrue? How do we do that? I mean, that's one of the things we're talking about today,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
I think it simplifies things ultimately for those who don't have to deal with all that belief stuff. I mean, I find that to be kind of excess baggage along the way, to have to carry that around and depend on somebody else, depend on a belief in something other than yourself. I look in hindsight at that as a burden. And I feel much lighter and I feel relief from letting go of that stuff, because I played along with that game for a long time. I mean, I tried, I held hands and said the Lord's Prayer thousands and thousands of times, thinking that's the only thing I had to do in order to really, really, truly be sober. And it was such a burden. It was such a battle. And it was such a constant denigration of myself, thinking I was a failure because I didn't really believe that stuff. And I found that to be, like I said, excess baggage that I feel so much lighter at letting go of that stuff.
well, like John Lennon said in a response to Mr. Zimmerman when he became religious, uh, instead of serving somebody, you have to learn how to serve yourself. Okay?
Yep, there you go.
I'm with one of my late atheist heroes, Mr. Lennon, on that score. All right? Because serving yourself doesn't mean that you're selfish necessarily. It means that you are looking for a foundation in life as an individual that works for you, not some foundation like this crap about emotional sobriety that somebody's laying out for you in a fucking lecture somewhere. I was at one of these conventions that they have, which I'm probably going to go to the next one in Phoenix for people, because I like to show up as a real atheist and rattle a cage a little bit out there. But I'm sitting down in Orlando a couple years ago, and I'm listening to this, trying to listen to this stuff about somebody telling me how to get to my center, all right, by using a system that I know was founded by and propounded by someone that saw that stuff as what they call a spiritual gateway. Somebody trying to give me a spiritual gateway. And I'm not the only one that feels, and I've had a lot of people come up and talk to us and talk to me about feeling surrounded and excluded when people are propounding these methodologies that don't make any sense to us. All right? Even though some of what's in there is healthy and correct, right? As far as, people living a better life, if you get more sleep, I don't get much sleep these days because of my age and other things. But if you take care of yourself and eat better and, get out there and do your thing in a kind of a healthy, reasonable way, you're going to start to feel better, and which will lead you to a state where your thinking is clearer and more and all that stuff, right? They take all that kind of stuff, right, and turn it into this fucking spiritual granola, which they tried to hand feed you in a meeting, telling you that this is the way to be, right? And contrary MFs like me just say, wait a minute, you're telling me what I'm going to think, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to be a representative of? You're telling me that, instead of saying, what I would say is you go out and find that and then come back and tell us what you found, right? As a result of your sobriety, as a result of your abstinence, as a result of you looking for a foundation for your life yourself. Instead of serving somebody, you're serving yourself, like the late, great John of Liverpool said to us. Okay?
And, ultimately that's considered selfishness by those traditional programs,
Yeah, because you're not.
You're supposed to squash your ego and not depend on yourself at all. You're supposed to depend on something other than yourself, a higher power, something outside of yourself, instead of just focusing on what you have, the strength that you have inside, and the determination that you
have inside. Okay.
And that decision making every single day, the decision to be abstinent is pretty simple. You don't have to find that somewhere else. It's here. It's in us.
Well, I think we both found, and that all of what worked for me after I made my decision and started on the road on January 3rd, 1987. It was pretty much a trial and error process for me. Going through life, making some pretty profound mistakes, and finding solutions that made sense for me, rather than rigidly going and, they love to have you journal. They love to have you write down all your little feelings and your little emotions and your what happened to me today, and who did what, and what did I do, and how did I not follow the principles that have been laid out to me today. They do that. The fundamentalists do that obsessively, right?
Yeah.
They
ultimately,
write down what they did and what they thought,
and ultimately to figure out what you did wrong and how you misbehaved, how you didn't follow the program. You didn't follow the right way.
When I moved to Russia and started my misbegotten business there, and went all these ups and downs, and met Guli and a lot of all that stuff happened. I ended up writing a book that was published about that. All right, which I'm fairly proud of. All right,
Good stuff. Yes.
and that about that, but that came from my own decisions, my good and bad, right? My own actions, my own emotional intensity, my great good fortune of meeting the person I'm currently with. Well, we'll have. She's got a brief trip to Europe, and when she gets back, we'll have our 20th anniversary on the 22nd of this month, which is extraordinarily amazing to a lot of people. Okay, including me. All right, but we went through all that to get here because we made our own decisions, good and bad, and we didn't have somebody else telling us what the fuck to do. Okay, and I wasn't drunk one day during that whole period and had a clarity of mind to find my own way and understand and accept whatever decisions I made, good or bad, along the way, right? That's life. That's a life that you get, and you get the ability to move within it. I mean, look at the long way you went from those years in New York that you had, to where you are now. It's like
Well, I was
amazing,
just
right?
thinking about that first experience I had in 1987. In fact, uh, I one reason I lasted exactly 1 year, going to 3-4 meetings a day for a solid year. I stayed sober, and I part of the reason I think I pulled away from the program and decided to go to that liquor store that night I picked up my 1 year coin was because I didn't believe. And I just assumed, I made the assumption that, well, I don't believe in that stuff. I don't believe in God. I don't believe I don't believe God's will and not mine. I don't believe any of that stuff. Therefore, I'm going to drink. I mean, for me, it kind of led to me
Well,
drinking. The fact that
that's
because I realized that I was failing at that program because I didn't have a strong belief. And therefore, what do I have to do with any of this stuff? So I completely
well,
backed away from it and said, I'm a failure, so I might as well drink.
right. And the fundamentalists always tell you, if the fundamentalists that so many of us have reacted in a toxic way, they always tell you that if you fail at this program, it's a death sentence. It's a sentence of death if you fail at this program. You either follow this, what they call a simple program, which is ridiculous because
Far
it
from simple.
puts you into emotional and mental prison, is what it does. If you fail at following our regimen, you're doomed, right? And some
Yeah.
people believe that.
Oh, yeah.
And when they fail at that regimen, it's a catastrophe for them.
Yeah. I mean, I was
And
told flat out when I drank again after that first year that I drank because, first of all, I didn't do steps and I didn't believe in God. And so
right,
it was obvious that I wasn't
right,
going to stay
and
sober
and
because
and
I didn't believe those two things. So, yeah,
right, and some people struggle with that proposition for years, like you did, right? And others, like I was just very lucky that I stumbled into a situation where I understood very clearly that it was either abstinence or death. It wasn't a program or death, right?
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't
right.
reading Bill Wilson's precepts, or getting to the Stations of the Cross, or reading William James and coming to some sort of conclusion about personal faith, or looking at Young's Mandalas and all the other shit they did or do. it was understanding that for me at that moment, it was the word abstinence that I needed to really get my head around.
Yeah, you're fortunate in that. Yes.
I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
And,
Because I don't remember ever hearing the word abstinence back then.
Well, they don't. They talk about they give you all kinds of words.
It was the belief in God and belief in the 12 steps of AA and NA. That was it.
As a way of life. Okay?
Those two belief systems.
You must embrace our way of life. And now they're coming back to the secular people saying, oh, we've got this emotional sobriety thing, which is another way of life. Okay? And it sounds reasonable and looks good, but it's really the same fucking thing dressed up as something else.
Yeah, and it's the definition of those behaviors is in the hands of the traditionalists,
and leading you towards some sort of spiritual awakening. Well, fuck that. We didn't go to any spiritual awakening, but through trial and error, despite the feelings of aloneness that I had when I was new, I found that there were like-minded people out there who didn't believe that stuff either. And in 1987, in the first part, that wasn't easy to find. But I was very lucky again when my inspired old late friends, Maxine and Tom, started that first atheist agnostic meeting in Washington in September of 1988. And where I was a member for many years until the internal contradictions of being at a meeting listed by that other organization, which I don't like to name, which you love to poke me about. You just love that shit. Okay, but I won't name it myself. Just the internal contradictions got to be too much, and I can't attend any such meeting that's identified with them in any way. But that's another story. I had many years of very, very good luck finding like-minded people who they all knew they were in the minority. We're a small minority. The average person has these fantasies about other worlds and angels and clouds and ridiculous concepts like life after death, like you're going to somehow live on when the cells and the chemicals in your body don't work anymore. Okay? Cells and chemicals, when they don't work, are gone. All right. And they just, I don't know. They just don't get that fact. But there are other people.
Can I just throw in a turning point for me in the understanding of all of these things and understanding the alternative? Wasn't until 10 years into this term of sobriety that I've just completed. And it was such a revelation to realize that there were other people that were sober who didn't believe. But the term that really turned me was when I realized that every time I heard somebody in the meetings say, in AA meetings and NA meetings, say, God's will, not mine.
Jesus
and praying for that, praying for God's will, not mine. That's where I hit a block. I hit the wall and I said, well, how do you even determine that? I mean, the son of Sam, the mass murderer back in New York City, he followed God. He believed that God was telling him to do those things. So was that God's will and not his? So I came to that conclusion where I don't know what that even means, God's will, not mine. And for me, that was a turning point because it also expressed just how lonely I was in those meetings, because I was saying it and going along with it and saying the prayers, but I didn't believe any of it. And it just didn't make any sense. I mean, I know what my will is. I'm pretty clear about my will. And that was the turning point when I had to realize my will is to go to the liquor store. So why not make it my will to stay abstinent. I
Right.
mean, it's my will, not somebody else's.
It's right. But what they want you to think is that you're going to be lonely and afraid and in all likelihood die drunk if you don't adhere to the principles of the group. And there's no way to reconcile that. All right. But when you see people that have had, like I did very early on, I saw people who had a meaningful and lasting recovery without any resort to fantasy or what I felt that was untrue. There were people that were living good, productive, normal lives, or normal, what they defined as normal life, right? Happy, productive lives on their terms without drugs and alcohol, without believing any of that stuff. I was very lucky. I met some very hardcore atheists here in Washington in those days that showed me that. They didn't tell me anything. They just showed me the kind of life they were living without alcohol and drugs. And I said, oh, that's okay. All right. And how did they get there? They got there by living without alcohol and drugs. I
Giving themselves credit for some of the good decisions they made along the way. I mean, I want some credit for some of those good decisions, man.
Oh yeah, I got such wonderful friends I've had for almost 40 years. I've got one wonderful friend of mine. She's older than I am. She's in her late 80s now, who was a very prominent architect here in Washington, but who was already sober for about 7 years when I met her in 88. She was at that first meeting of that atheist agnostic group that we had here in DC, the founding members of that group.
What year was that?
1988, September
Wow.
1988. And
man, I wish I had
she's
around
still,
for that.
she came to see me
Eesh.
here. She was originally from, I won't say which country. I don't want to identify too much. She was originally from a country that was dominated by the Russians, that in 1991 was liberated, and in Eastern Europe. And she went back. She decided that she was going to go back. Her parents had come from there. She spoke that language as a kid, and she had been raised in Australia, where her parents had immigrated to, and educated in the United Kingdom, and then ended up married here and working as a very strong, prominent architect here in Washington for many years. She went back to that country as an older person, single, and did constructive and good things in that country for the people that she felt were her people. And all of that was possible because she lived a normal, rational life on her own terms, in her own way, without any resort to any of that. And almost 40 years later, we're still friends, and I have undying admiration for her as one of those examples that I got when I was much younger, right? A slightly older person doing things in that way. And that's really the experience I was able to get, right? And I got it. I mean, I think I was very fortunate in getting it that way, right? And that was like a real boon to me, right? Because it dawned upon me then, right then, obviously, early on in this whole process, that what all these other people were talking about in terms of being able to live a normal and rational life was untrue, absolutely untrue. And it was like crystallized everything for me, right? I got lucky.
Yeah, that's very lucky. I wish I was able to save all the time that I spent pretending to go along with all this, the belief system, and all the while feeling like a failure because I didn't really believe the faith. I didn't really have the faith, thinking that I was a loser and that I was ultimately going to get drunk and die because I deep down inside I didn't really believe all that stuff.
There's no failure. You're sitting there with 20 years. There's no failure involved
Yeah,
there now, right?
yeah. Well, this
I
is
had a lot.
my third attempt. I've
Okay,
failed two times.
I often talk about the insight that I had about my drinking when I was 25, that I absolutely had to stop, but I didn't do it until I was 38. Okay, I'm now 77, and if I had done it when I was 25, I might not have some of the stuff that I have to deal with physically right now. I don't know. It's too bad I didn't do it. That was a failure in life. And, I should have published my first book way back when, but I didn't do it until 2017 because life took me in other directions because of that, right? And recovery is recovery, right? And it isn't instant for most of us. It's a struggle for most of us. I mean, when I had the insight about abstinence when I was 25, but didn't quit till I was 38, all right? There's something wrong there, right? I didn't get it somehow, right? I had to go through all the shit I went through to take me all the way to the bottom to get there, right? Too bad. But recovery is recovery. And even though it isn't instant, and we arrived at it after long personal struggles and many setbacks, it is too precious and too personal a process to be trivialized by any theology, spiritual belief system, or fashionable pop psychology or internet-driven crap that people try to sell you. It's too precious for that. I'm not buying anything they're selling me. Well, I will buy some nice clothes once in a while they're selling me on the internet, but I won't buy any ideas that they're selling me on the internet. Okay? All right? And that's a good thing because we got there. We didn't get there totally on our own. We got there through the help of people like my friend who's now overseas, who's living a great last part of her life in the country of her choice. But a lot, those type of people, and of which there were many, helped me along the way. But it was my own insight into my own life and my own problems that got me to the point where I'm living the happiest years, despite all the shit we talked about in the last episode with our personal physical struggles. I'm living the happiest and most fulfilling years of my life right now. I got from there to here, right? I could be a miserable old man, all right? But I'm not because, well, I might be miserable from time to time and I'm old from time to time.
Yeah, we heard a little bit of that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'm not I got my miseries, but I'm not
I'm not a
miserable old man. You don't look like a miserable old man either.
Well, I try not to
today,
be, but,
today, because after all these structures and this crap that people tried to sell us when we were younger or newer in this got stripped away, there was just that bedrock daily commitment to the word abstinence and all that implies. No recreational drugs, no alcohol. Every day, a step-by-step process guided by ourselves and the one word we know that works. And that, I think for us, that's pretty much it in the end. We don't get anything that works in life unless we follow that step by step, day by day. I made the mistake of watching some of the fluff on CNN today, except for the inspiring speech in New York by our new socialist mayor up there in New York, which was wonderful. But there was all this fluff on and they were talking about how to recover. They had a doctor from a prominent hospital in Boston talking about how you recover from a hangover today. That was a featured thing on the,
Yeah. I don't miss having to pay attention to those things.
Yeah, and she was talking about, oh, you need water, you need sleep. And, I used to recover. When I had hangovers, I would often recover from a hangover. I didn't much care for vodka, but 2 large shots of vodka and spicy tomato juice across the street at the bar from my old apartment on Connecticut Avenue. I'd go over to Child Herald and get a couple of Bloody Marys. That would be my hangover cure. But this doctor starts talking about, well, if I had an endoscope and I looked down in your throat and your stomach today, I would see all this inflammation and disturbed tissues in your body. And I'm saying, what is this shit? She's talking about endoscopes and disturbed tissues, and then these people have this concept called dry January, where they stop drinking for a month. Okay, I had dry January and numerous times. Okay, in the years when I was young and drinking, when I would get, but I always drank it more, and it always got worse. Always. All right, dry January. What is,
Yeah, I never had.
You have to worry about dry January today. I think you're already dry, Michael. We're dry, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine choosing to be dry for a month. I was addicted, so there was no question about skipping a month. I couldn't skip a day.
Right. Well, the doctor goes.
It's a good sign. I mean, the people are at least aware of the need to be dry at least once in a while. I know there's a trend for that experimenting with sobriety, that kind of thing, and I think that's a good trend, that people are at least examining their habits a little bit and saying, "Wait a minute, it's a pop, not so great."
The thing about it is, when you stop and start again. I mean, this dry gin, other stuff is stuff maybe for people that had a little cocktail over the holidays and they maybe said some stupid thing or embarrassed themselves at a party, or some boyfriend or girlfriend left in a huff because they were being an asshole because they were drunk, that kind of thing. But they're not the daily drinker that I was, okay? The dedicated bar crawler that I was. But they've had a little problem over the holiday, and dry January might, I can understand why. And they have their mocktails. They have all this stuff with no alcohol in it that tastes like you're drinking, and all this other stupid shit. For me, it's stupid shit. Maybe not for them, because I was the kind of hardcore drinker who, when he stopped and started, always got worse. Never better, always worse. Until it got so bad that I had to stop. Right? Same with you, right?
Yeah.
It just got so bad, you just couldn't, right?
Well, it got to the point where I just couldn't deny that I was addicted. I mean, I've spent most of my adult life denying that I was addicted. And it came down to it being so obvious to other people too that I was addicted. And once you face the reality, the truth, and be honest about it, then I mean, that was the bottom for me, just realizing that I was addicted. and telling myself truthfully, yeah, I'm addicted. I got to stop this. And then looking for the reasons why I wanted to stop it. And, and then of course, I mean, in our society, our culture, you're pretty much given one way. Well, you're told there's one way to do it, and that's it. And
Well,
that's all I knew, and it
that's
was to go
maybe
to AA and
lessening.
NA. There was no
Right,
other choice.
right. That's mostly lessening. That is less. That tendency is lessening now, but they're going in the direction of chemicals to reduce your cravings and chemicals that may stop your drinking and all of this other kind of stuff. And these other programs, so-called programs, smart recovery and all these dharma and these Buddhist retreats and all this other kind of stuff that just may work for some folks, where I think us hardcore atheists, at least in the view of many of them that I've talked to, the ones that have helped me the most and the ones that have been most productive in terms of dealing with my own quirks and twists and turns, helping me do that over the years, have been the ones that have that commitment to abstinence as the only solution. Don't talk to me about mocktails. Don't talk to me about starting and stopping drinking because you have a hangover in January. That doesn't work. That may work for others, but that doesn't work for me. There's only one thing that works for me. Or having, I mean, after I was in the hospital, I was on so many narcotics because of this back problem and other things associated. I was in so much pain that the doctors insisted that I have Narcan in the house just in case,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I had Narcan. I've still got one of them sitting in the back. It was just in the house. Uh, while I was being medically supervised, they said I had to have this Narcan. There are people walking around with these addictive habits that won't get to the Narcan in time, right? In my case, I consulted with the pharmacologist at Kaiser, who gave me the schedule and the dates and the times to reduce the hospital drugs that I was being given. And in a month later, it was done. It was gone. I can't imagine living with that threat, right, permanently.
Hmm.
And maybe if you do take a little too much of that stuff, there's no way you're not getting to any Narcan in time, right? And you're
Yeah,
getting hauled away in the meat
yeah.
wagon.
I mean, you've gone beyond the point of no return. It's like one time I officially overdosed on alcohol back when in my 20 something years, and I was taken to a hospital and had my stomach pumped, all that stuff. I was not able to take myself to the hospital and have my stomach pumped. I mean, so how do you, if you overdose on drugs, how are you going to be aware of the fact that, oh, I'll reach for that Narcan? No, you're not going to be able to do it. I mean, you're beyond that point of no return. You can't choose to suddenly go, oh, okay, I need my Narcan. Just like I couldn't choose to have my stomach pumped because I had overdosed on alcohol. You've got to depend on other people being around to save your ass. I mean,
Yeah, well, that's what the Narcan was for. If I on these hospital drugs, which I didn't, of course, ever abuse, if it got to the blood level where I passed out or something like that, my wife was supposed to, stick the crap up my nose or whatever it is and do it. But that was what, that just, having that medically supervised episode of having to do that, which I didn't have any choice about because it was just impossible. Otherwise, it was just no choice, something I had to do. And then was step by step was weaned off of this stuff. But the thought of living with that every day, right? And the thought of living like I did with alcohol that was as toxic to my personality and behavior as I could possibly, I was not in a good place. The only way I got to the point where it was permanent was through that commitment to abstinence and also associating with like-minded people. They weren't all atheists, but most of them were,
Yeah.
right? With whom we shared our honest thoughts and our desire for a continued and productive recovery. And the other part of it was, and this is, it does go back to some of those older other precepts, when you got to the point where you could be of assistance to other people, that was helpful as well, because you saw through positive and unfortunately mostly negative examples of what happened to people when they didn't understand that word and the fact that they had to quit. I have many, many sad stories that I've seen in the last 39 years. And it always just, I was always saying, well, if I continue my abstinence, they won't be talking about me that way. They may be talking about me for some reason, but they won't be talking about me that way, which is so sad and so awful and such. There's no real personal legacy at all to leave then, right? Except that sadness of the method of your departure. That's not good. We're all going, but we don't want to be considered by and remembered by the people who knew us here that way. Because time is short, right? Legacies are short. Life is short. And we don't want to abuse our lives in that way so that that's where we end it, right? We don't want to end that way, right, Michael?
Right.
We don't want
Right.
to go. And that's a real incentive to do this.
So the bottom line is you've come to the conclusion that it isn't just abstinence, but it's also that two-way street of connecting with other people who are trying to remain abstinent.
That part is a two-way street.
Yeah, that's
but I'm
helping
not
each other and being helped by each other.
Right. But I don't have access to anybody if I'm not abstinent.
Absolutely.
Yep. I don't have access to any assistance whatsoever if I'm not abstinent. I don't have any access to my wife, my daughter, my family, the friends, my old associates, some of whom I've known for 55 or more years now, some old dear friends. I don't have access to anybody, right? Okay. Unless I'm there where I need to be.
Okay, so a newcomer comes to you and says, okay, I understand what you're saying about abstinence, and I understand what you're saying about staying connected. So how do I stay abstinent? If I'm addicted to alcohol, what do I do to stay abstinent?
This is what it is. This is what it is. This is where it's at.
Because, they're going to get the line from the traditionalists that, well, okay, to stay abstinent, you have to do this and this and this and this and this and this.
No, and no. All right? It's a day by day, minute by minute when you're new, commitment that you made to yourself, understanding that you must do this. And if you do not develop the minute by minute, day by day connection with yourself, not with somebody else's idea, right? It's gonna be very tough. Now, a lot of people who make a commitment to others stay dry or stay sober, but they made a commitment not to themselves, they made a commitment to something else, and that's something I cannot do. You can do that if you need to and you want to. Go make a commitment to something else. But
it's not
day
necessary.
by day, if you're a hardcore mother like us, it's day by day, minute by minute. And we're running slightly over time today. We don't want to overstay our welcome, but we do want to indicate, I think, that sober day by day, minute by minute commitment leads to my friend Michael's favorite word.
Hope. There's always hope. There's always hope.
If you're sober, if you
make that decision, that simple decision to not drink or use today,
get to the word hope, all right? Which can lead, if we're lucky, to the word love, and in our own life and trying to spread that out in our own tiny micro way to the macro world, to peace and to love, which is the way we like to end these podcasts.
Peace and love is a result of abstinence, ultimately.
Peace and love is a result of abstinence.
You'll find it.
And even us old hippies who are, for many people, blessedly fading away, all right? Because we had too much influence in society and all the other crap they say about it. Right, all the shit, our legacy we left. But peace and love works always if you embrace it for yourself and your own life. And that's where we'll leave you today at 1 hour and 2 minutes and 16 seconds. We love you all, and we wish you a happy and productive new year. And for those of you still struggling, we wish, and those of you who've been around a long time, longer than us, we wish you a sober and reasonably happy new year as well, because there's no such thing as perfection, right? Peace and love. We love you all.
Peace and love.
Talk to you soon if we're able. Okay? Thank you.